Music Management Podcast, your gateway to the cutting edge of innovation and the world of navigating the music industry as an indie artist. Join our hosts as they explore the latest trends in the industry, artist breakthroughs, IRM releases, and more on the IRM Music Management Podcast, powered by Indie Roadmap.
All right, let's jump right in today. We're looking at turning your passion into a paycheck.
Ooh, I like that.
You know, a lot of people struggle with this idea, and we're going to dig specifically into this guide to becoming a full-time artist from Indie Roadmap, or IRM for short.
Yeah.
What I think is really cool about this is it's not just like, some theoretical ideas like go and make a bunch of music or whatever. This is packed with data and strategies from artists that are actually using their platform.
Right, and that's what I find so fascinating about it. In the modern world, it's not just about making great art anymore. It's really about treating your art like a business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we see across pretty much every creative field these days, whether you're a musician, a writer, a designer, or even a YouTuber.
Okay, so business skills are key, but what kind of results are we talking about here? Like, what are these IRM artists actually seeing?
Well, the numbers are pretty compelling. Artists using their platform for business development, they're seeing like a 6-fold increase in revenue compared to those who are kind of going it alone.
Wow.
And their fan retention rate is a whopping 35%, which means those fans are sticking around.
6 times the revenue? That's got to make a huge difference when you're trying to make a living from your art.
Oh, absolutely. It's a game changer.
So let's break down this guide. It's structured in 3 phases, kind of like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly.
And the first phase is all about building your professional foundation. They really focus on these critical first 3 months.
Yeah, the foundation is so important.
So what are some of the most important things to tackle during that initial phase?
Well, they really emphasize mastering the platform itself right from the get-go.
Okay.
So IRM has a 5-day tutorial series to get you started. And I think the general idea here, whether you're using IRM specifically or not, is just understanding the tools that are available to you is so essential.
Yeah, like a writer mastering grammar and different writing styles.
Exactly. You got to know your tools.
Like you can't build a house without knowing how to use a hammer.
Right.
What else? What else is crucial in those early days?
Building a strong digital presence, I think, is absolutely key.
Okay.
So this means having a website that really represents your brand and a social media strategy that's going to help you connect with your target audience. They also mentioned setting up emails and landing pages.
Ah, so capturing those email addresses, I've heard that's so important for musicians these days.
It's crucial. I think, it might sound technical, but it's really about just creating those initial touch points with your fans.
So like building your audience and getting that fan data.
Exactly.
So the guide talks about revenue streams pretty quickly. No time for starving artist cliches, right?
Right.
What are they recommending for those first 3 months?
Well, they encourage you to set up merchandise integration right away. Start using their booking tools to land some gigs. And they even talk about kicking off a radio submission strategy.
Wow, so like really hitting the ground running.
Yeah, they're pushing for diversification right out of the gate.
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
That's smart.
It's about creating multiple streams of income, which is a smart move for anyone, musician or otherwise.
So you've got your foundation built, you're starting to bring in some income. What's next?
Phase 2 is all about growth and momentum.
Oh,
This is where things really start to take shape.
okay.
And we're talking months 4 through 6. The focus now shifts to building a robust marketing infrastructure.
Okay.
A little more advanced.
Marketing infrastructure, what does that even entail?
Well, for starters, it's about crafting those email marketing campaigns
Okay.
to stay top of mind with your fans. Remember those email addresses we were talking about?
Yeah.
Now it's time to put them to good use.
Yep.
The guide also emphasizes creating compelling one-page show promos.
One-page show promos. Tell me more about that.
So this is basically like creating a mini resume for your music.
Okay.
It should include everything a venue or promoter needs to know. You're talking professional flyers, performance videos, a bio that captures your essence, your set list, and even contract templates. It shows you're serious, professional, and ready to rock.
Yeah, I can see how that would make a big difference when you're trying to book shows.
Absolutely.
It's like the difference between showing up for a job interview in, a T-shirt and jeans versus a well-tailored suit.
Presentation matters.
Presentation is everything.
So speaking of booking, how much emphasis do they put on that in this phase?
Booking is a major focus here. They actually recommend dedicating 5 to 10 hours per week to booking.
Wow.
with the goal of landing 15 to 20 shows in those first 3 months.
That's a serious hustle.
It is, but it's about treating your music like a business.
You have to be proactive and constantly seeking opportunities. And of course, IRM has a venue database with over 15,000 active listings to help you find those gigs.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's all about putting in the work.
So you're putting in the work, you're utilizing the resources, regardless of the platform you're using.
Exactly. And they also emphasize working closely with your manager during this phase, which I think is a crucial point.
Okay.
Even though this guide is about empowering artists, it doesn't advocate going it alone. Having that guidance and support can be so valuable.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when you're navigating the music industry, which can be pretty complex.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've built your foundation, you're gaining momentum, you're booking gigs and bringing in some revenue. What's the final phase all about?
Phase 3 is called scaling your career, and this is where we see the real payoff from all the hard work in those previous phases. It takes us from months 7 to 12.
Okay.
And it focuses on optimizing those revenue streams across multiple channels, so live performance, digital, and fan engagement.
All right, let's break those down one by one. What are some specific strategies they recommend for optimizing live performance revenue?
Well, they suggest using QR codes at shows to capture fan data.
Okay.
Someone's enjoying your set, they scan your code, and boom, they're on your email list.
That's brilliant.
It's seamless and way more efficient than scrambling for names and email addresses after a show.
Right, right.
For those more traditional revenue streams like merch and tips, IRM's data shows artists averaging $15 to $100 per show in tips.
Wow.
And $20 to $70 in merch sales. That might not seem like much at first.
But it adds up.
It adds up, especially if you're gigging regularly.
And especially when you're already starting to see that 6-fold increase in revenue, it's all adding up.
It is. It's all compounding. Now, on the digital front, they suggest exploring those radio submissions we talked about earlier, sync opportunities, which is basically getting your music placed in TV shows or commercials, and even sponsorship acquisition.
Those all sound like great ways to expand your reach.
They are.
But are those opportunities really realistic for most independent artists?
Well, according to IRM's data, radio submissions have a 10 to 15% success rate. Sync opportunities are a little bit lower, 1 to 5%.
Okay.
And sponsorships come in at a surprisingly high 50%.
50% for sponsorships, that's higher than I would have guessed. What are some ways they recommend connecting with those potential sponsors?
Well, they really suggest showcasing your online presence, highlighting your audience demographics, and crafting really compelling proposals that demonstrate the value you can bring to a brand.
So you're positioning yourself as a partner, not just someone looking for money.
Exactly. It's about treating your music like a business.
Right. Now, what about this fan engagement monetization I keep hearing about?
That's where things get really interesting. They're talking about things like tiered reward systems.
Okay.
Where fans get, exclusive content or discounts in exchange for their support.
I love that idea.
It's like creating a VIP experience for your most dedicated fans.
Right. And it's a way to monetize your fan base without just relying on, album sales or streaming revenue, which we know is really tough for independent artists these days.
Right. It's about building a sustainable model that rewards both you and your fans.
So we've covered the 3 main phases of the guide: building a foundation, gaining momentum, and scaling your career. It's a pretty comprehensive roadmap.
It is.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than just those 3 phases, right?
Oh, there's definitely more.
Yeah.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the advanced strategies they outline,
Okay.
as well as those all-important success metrics you should be aiming for.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're really trying to figure out how to turn your creative passion into a thriving business. Now, in the last part, we were talking about those first 3 phases from the IRM guide: laying the foundation, building momentum, and then scaling things up. They really focus on those different stages of growth for an artist's career. But what I'm curious about is the nitty-gritty. What are the specific tactics and strategies artists can actually use to achieve those goals?
That's a great question. And honestly, one thing that stood out to me in this guide is that they really emphasize establishing systems early on, even in those initial stages.
Yeah.
It's not just about raw talent or passion. It's about actually building a framework to support your growth over time.
Okay.
Having that structure instead of just winging it.
So structure over just winging it. Okay, I'm listening. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, they talk a lot about mastering the tools of your trade, whatever those might be.
Right. For musicians using IRM, It's all about diving deep into their platform. They have that 5-day tutorial we mentioned, which seems like a really smart way to get up to speed. But even outside of IRM, think about, any profession. You really need to be proficient with the tools and technologies that are specific to your field.
Right, like a writer mastering grammar and different writing styles, or a designer learning the ins and outs of their software.
Exactly. It's about, laying the groundwork for success. Now, once you have a grasp of the tools, the guide really emphasizes building that all-important digital presence.
Okay, we touched on this before, but I'm ready to go deeper now. It's more than just like posting a few selfies on Instagram, right?
All right. It's about crafting a website that really reflects your brand, developing a social media strategy that's going to resonate with your target audience. And, let's not forget about email marketing.
Yeah.
I know it might seem a bit old school in today's world of like instant everything, but building an email list is still incredibly valuable.
Okay, I'll admit, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around why email is so important. Isn't it all about social media these days?
Social media is definitely a powerful tool, but, algorithms change all the time, and you're always at the mercy of the platform. Email gives you a direct line to your fans, a way to communicate without all those limitations.
So it's about owning your audience, not just renting it from a social media platform.
Exactly. And it allows you to nurture those relationships over time, building a loyal following that's invested in your journey.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here. So we've got the tools, the website, the social media strategy, the email list.
Yeah.
What else is crucial in those early stages?
Well, the guide emphasizes the importance of generating income right from the start.
Okay.
They really encourage artists to, set up merch integration, utilize those booking tools to start landing gigs, and even explore radio submission strategies. What I think is fascinating is they're advocating for diversification from day one.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? It makes sense to have multiple streams of income, especially in the unpredictable world of freelance work. But let's get real. Are these revenue streams actually realistic for most artists, or is this just wishful thinking?
It's definitely achievable, but it requires effort and strategy. The guide actually highlights some average figures from IRM artists. So for merch, they're seeing sales ranging from like $20 to $70 per show.
Okay.
And for tips, it's about $15 to $100 per show. Now, those numbers might not seem huge on their own.
But if you're playing several shows a month, that can really add up.
Exactly. And it's all about building that momentum. As you gain more visibility and fans, those numbers can grow exponentially. Plus, by diversifying your income streams, you're creating a much more stable foundation for your career.
So you're not relying on just one single source of income, which can be pretty precarious, especially in the creative arts.
Right. It's about building a safety net and creating multiple avenues for success.
Okay, so let's say you've laid the groundwork, you're starting to generate some income. What's the next step in this roadmap?
Phase 2, remember, growth and momentum.
Right.
This is where you really start to ramp things up.
Bring on the momentum. What's the game plan for this phase?
It's all about building a solid marketing infrastructure. Remember those email addresses we talked about?
Yeah.
Now's the time to craft compelling email campaigns that will keep your fans engaged and coming back for more. And they also recommend creating what they call one-page show promos.
Right. We touched on those earlier. Can you remind me why those are so important?
Think of it like this. You're a venue owner, and you're bombarded with like emails and messages from artists wanting to play your venue. What's going to make you stop and actually pay attention?
A well-crafted professional package that showcases the artist's talent and their brand.
Exactly. It's like a mini resume for your music. It should include everything a venue or a promoter needs to know. Professional flyers, high-quality performance videos, a compelling bio, your set list, even contract templates. It shows you're serious, professional, and ready to rock.
It's about standing out from the crowd and making it easy for people to see your value.
Absolutely. And a huge part of this phase is booking gigs, which, can feel really daunting for a lot of artists.
I can imagine. Reaching out to venues, negotiating contracts, it can be a lot to handle, especially if you're not really used to the business side of things.
That's why the guide emphasizes dedicating some serious time to this process. They recommend 5 to 10 hours per week.
Wow.
With the goal of landing, like 15 to 20 shows in those first 3 months. It's about treating it like a job, showing up consistently and putting in the effort.
It's not just about talent, it's about hustle. I like it. Any tips for making that booking process a little less overwhelming?
Well, there are a lot of resources available to artists these days, from online platforms to industry directories. IRM, for example, has a venue database with over 15,000 listings,
Wow.
which can be a great starting point.
That sounds incredibly helpful, having all those venues at your fingertips. But what if you're not using a platform like IRM? What are some other ways to connect with venues and book gigs?
Networking is key. Attending industry events, connecting with other musicians, reaching out to venues directly.
Yeah.
It's all about building those relationships and putting yourself out there.
Right. It's not just about sending out mass emails. It's about making genuine connections.
Exactly. And speaking of connections, the guide also emphasizes working closely with your manager during this phase. It's a good reminder that you don't have to go it alone.
Having that guidance and support can be invaluable, especially when you're navigating the complexities of the music industry.
Absolutely. A good manager can help you with everything from booking gigs and negotiating contracts to developing your marketing strategy and connecting you with the right people.
Okay, so you've built your foundation, you're gaining momentum, you're booking shows. What's next on this roadmap to full-time artistry?
Well, that brings us to phase 3, scaling your career. This is where you take all that hard work you put in and you really start to see the results.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the key to scaling things up?
It's about optimizing those revenue streams we talked about earlier, but on a larger scale. They break it down into 3 main areas: live performance, digital income, and fan engagement monetization.
Okay, let's dive into each of those. Starting with live performance, what are some ways to maximize revenue beyond just ticket sales?
Well, we talked about merch and tips earlier, and those are definitely still relevant. But they also suggest getting creative with things like VIP packages, meet and greets, and even offering those exclusive experiences to your most dedicated fans.
I love that. It's about going beyond just the standard show experience and creating something truly memorable for your audience.
Exactly, and it allows you to charge a premium for those exclusive experiences, which can significantly boost your income.
Okay, so that's live performance. What about digital income? We briefly touched on this before, but I'd love to hear more about the specific strategies they recommend.
So they talk about exploring those radio submissions, which can be a great way to gain exposure and reach a wider audience. They also mention sync opportunity, which is basically getting your music placed in TV shows, movies, commercials.
Yeah.
And then there's sponsorship acquisition, which can be a real game changer for artists who are, savvy about building those relationships with brands.
Those all sound like fantastic opportunities, but I imagine they're pretty competitive. Is it really realistic for most independent artists to land those kinds of deals?
It's definitely not easy, but it's possible with the right approach. The guide actually provides some interesting data points based on IRM artists. They say radio submissions have about a 10 to 15% success rate. Sync opportunities are a little lower, 1 to 5%, and sponsorships have a surprisingly high success rate of 50%.
50% for sponsorships? That seems incredibly high. What are they doing differently to achieve those kinds of results?
They emphasize the importance of building a really strong online presence, showcasing your audience demographics, and crafting compelling proposals that really demonstrate the value you can bring to a brand.
So it's about treating those potential sponsors like partners, not just sources of funding.
Exactly. And it's about showcasing your professionalism, your reach, and your ability to connect with a target audience.
Now, what about this fan engagement monetization I keep hearing about? What exactly does that involve?
This is where things get really interesting. They're talking about things like tiered reward systems,
Okay.
where fans can unlock, exclusive content, discounts, or experiences in exchange for their support.
So it's like a VIP club for your most dedicated fans.
Yeah, exactly. And it allows you to monetize your fan base without relying solely on album sales or streaming revenue, which, as we know, can be pretty challenging in today's music industry.
I love that. It's a win-win for both the artist and the fans. The artist gets additional support. The fans get rewarded for their loyalty.
Exactly. And it fosters a much deeper connection between you and your audience, which is so important for long-term success.
Okay, so we've covered the 3 main areas of focus for scaling your career: live performance, digital income, and fan engagement. It's a lot to take in. Any final thoughts on this phase before we move on?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that scaling your career isn't just about doing more of what you're already doing. It's about working smarter, not harder. It's about optimizing your processes, leveraging the right tools and resources, and building a sustainable model for growth.
And it's about remembering that you're building a business, not just pursuing a passion project.
Exactly. Now, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of those advanced strategies they outline, as well as those all-important success metrics you should be aiming for.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this guide to becoming a full-time artist. And we've covered a lot of ground already, from building a solid foundation to actually scaling your career. But I have a feeling there's even more juicy insights waiting for us in this guide. What else is in store?
Yeah, you're right. We've only just scratched the surface. This guide also delves into some advanced strategies
Okay.
that can really take your music career to the next level. These are the things that really separate those who just dream about success from those who actually achieve it.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are some of these advanced strategies? Give me the good stuff.
Well, they talk a lot about time management, which is something we all struggle with. But it's especially crucial for musicians or any creative entrepreneurs who are juggling a lot of different responsibilities.
Right.
And the guide specifically recommends kind of splitting your time between mobile and desktop platform usage. They suggest spending about 20% of your time on mobile for those quick tasks, on-the-go updates. And then 70% on desktop for those deeper dives into, data analysis, strategy development.
Makes sense. So you need that flexibility to kind of manage things on the fly, but also dedicated time to really focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. They also suggest aiming for, 4 to 7 social media posts per week, which, sounds about right for staying active without overwhelming your audience. But what's interesting is they encourage you to experiment with different posting times and content formats to see what resonates best with your specific audience.
So it's not just about posting for the sake of posting, it's about being strategic and understanding what your audience actually wants to see.
Right. It's about quality over quantity.
Speaking of quality, they also emphasize the importance of show preparation.
Yeah,
Recommending a dedicated 3 to 5 hours per week
at least.
for rehearsals, set list refinement, making sure your gear's in top shape.
Absolutely. That's something a lot of artists underestimate.
Mm-hmm.
But it can make a huge difference in the quality of your performance and just your overall professionalism.
Right. It's like anything else. Preparation is key.
Absolutely.
Now, one thing I'm always kind of curious about is data analysis. I know it's important, but to be honest, it can feel a bit overwhelming. What are some of the key metrics we should be tracking? And, how can we actually make sense of all those numbers?
That's a great question, and the guide does a really good job of breaking it down.
Mm-hmm.
They emphasize tracking things like your website bounce rate, which basically tells you how many people are leaving your site after viewing only one page.
Okay.
For music pages, a good benchmark is around 15%. So if your bounce rate is significantly higher than that, it might be a sign that you need to make some adjustments to your website design or content.
So it's about identifying those red flags and making improvements along the way.
Exactly. They also recommend, keeping an eye on your fan engagement metrics.
Yeah.
How many people are opening your emails, clicking your links, interacting with your social media posts.
So really understanding what's resonating with your audience and doubling down on those strategies.
Right. It's all about gathering those data points and using them to, make informed decisions. Now, speaking of goals, this guide sets some pretty ambitious targets for year one, designed to really push you outside of your comfort zone.
Right. Challenge accepted. What are we talking about here?
They suggest aiming for a 100% growth in your social media following,
Wow.
which sounds daunting, but remember, it's about quality over quantity.
Right.
They also want to see a monthly revenue increase of $600 to $1,200 by month 6, and a pretty big jump in the number of shows you're booking for years 2 and 3. Something like 50 to 250 shows.
Wow, those are some huge numbers. But I guess that's the point, right? To kind of challenge yourself and strive for something significant.
Exactly. It's about setting your sights high and, believing in your ability to achieve those goals.
Yeah.
Of course, the guide emphasizes that these are just benchmarks and everyone's journey is going to be different. The key is to set goals that are meaningful to you.
Right. It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about focusing on your own growth and celebrating those achievements.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about the strategies and tactics outlined in this guide, but I think it's important to remember that there's more to success than just following a set of instructions.
Right. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about bringing your own unique voice and passion to everything you do.
Exactly. And it's about building a genuine connection with your audience. That's something no guide or platform can teach you. It really has to come from the heart.
So how do we actually cultivate that connection? What are some things artists can do to really resonate with their audience on a deeper level?
Well, I think it starts with being authentic. People can spot a fake a mile away. So don't try to be someone you're not. Share your story, your struggles, your triumphs,
Yeah.
and just let your personality shine through.
I love that. It's about being vulnerable and letting people see the real you.
Exactly. And it's about engaging with your audience, responding to comments, answering questions, showing that you genuinely care about the people who are supporting you.
Right. It's about building a community, not just a fan base.
Exactly. And that community can be an incredible source of support, inspiration, and motivation.
Now, we've talked a lot about the practical aspects of building a music career, but I think it's equally important to talk about the mental and emotional side of things.
Oh, absolutely. It's not always easy to put yourself out there, especially when you're facing rejection or setbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why mindset is so crucial. The guide actually emphasizes the importance of believing in yourself,
Yeah.
even when things get tough. It's about embracing a growth mindset, seeing challenges as opportunities for learning, and celebrating those wins along the way.
I love that. It's about focusing on the journey, not just the destination. Because, let's be real, the music path is rarely a straight line.
Exactly. There will be detours, there will be roadblocks, there will be unexpected twists and turns, but it's all part of the adventure.
And it's those experiences that really shape us as artists and as human beings.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to emphasize one final point that really resonated with me from this guide.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's this golden nugget of wisdom?
It's the idea that even though this guide, focuses specifically on musicians using the IRM platform, the underlying principles apply to anyone pursuing a creative career,
Right.
regardless of their chosen field.
That's so important. It's about extracting those universal truths and applying them to your own unique journey.
Exactly. Whether you're a writer, a designer, a filmmaker, a musician, the fundamentals remain the same. Treat your art like a business, build a strong online presence, connect with your audience, and never stop learning and growing.
Beautifully said. So to all our listeners out there who are pursuing their creative dreams, remember, you've got this.
The world needs your unique voice, your talent, and your passion. Go out there and make some magic.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into the guide to becoming a full-time artist. We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and maybe even a little bit life-changing. Until next time, keep creating and keep shining.